Most founders say that they want to step back from their business, but the moment that the opportunity comes, many of them don't. Not because they can't, but because they don't trust what happens next. They need to be able to trust who they're bringing into their team can do exactly what they've been doing in their business for sometimes many years. And the real question is that about the team or the people that you're bringing in to help you, or is that about you? Welcome back to The Second Voice, where we uncover the conversations that leaders don't say out loud. And I'm your host, Louisa Hogan. And today we're getting into the tension that every founder hits at some point as they scale their business. And that is the desire to step away from the business or step back from the business that they built, and then the voice that might not let them do that. And I have an absolutely fantastic guest with me today to help me explore this, all the way from Texas. His name is Rich Aston, and he has a 45-year career owning small businesses, which I so admire as a business owner myself. And in that time, he became very frustrated about the choice between bringing in outside leadership talent who didn't fit the culture of his organizations versus promoting excellent but unprepared existing employees into leadership positions. And as a result, he's developed a training program to develop leaders in his own company, which was so successful, he was able to retire and leave management of his businesses to his leadership team. And I can't wait to hear what that's all about as I'm scaling my own business myself. And he's also written a book called Growing Your Own: Common Sense Advice for Developing Leaders in Small Business. It's a guide to the principles taught in his training course. And the book has been described as practical, actionable, and based on Rich's real world experience in small business. Well, Rich, I am so thrilled that you are here to join me today, all the way in Australia and you all the way on the other side of the world. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a conversation I love having.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. So, I've given a little bit of an intro about you, but I'd love to hear more about your business journey. I know that's a long span, 45 years, incredible and inspiring. But tell me a little bit more about that journey and the path that you took.
Sure. And it actually started about 55 years ago. And when I got out of the Navy, I joined a company called Trammell Crow, which was a large real estate developer, but a very entrepreneurial company. And I soon learned that I was in the midst of smart and driven people who really taught me so much about ethical business practices, about the importance of culture, about empowering people and the power of empowering people. And I just was, it was kind of dumb luck really to get to start my career there. I always knew I wanted to be in business for myself. So I became a partner in that company, was a partner for 5 years, and then sold my interest back to my partners and decided to pursue small business. So that was 1983, long time ago. I did several things over the next 5 years, and in 1988, I purchased a nearly bankrupt HVAC company, and I still own those companies, that company today, which is now two companies. And along the way, I did a few other things, but since 1983, I have only been in small businesses, and I think I have owned eight different businesses across different industries during that time.
That's incredible. I love how it was, like you say, it's dumb luck, but it was just meant to be, right? And it's so fantastic that you had that experience and you ended up there. And from the Navy too. My husband was in the Australian Navy, so he's going to love listening to you talk too, as he's thinking about business too. So I'd love to know, in that time, eight businesses, was there a moment where you realized that you couldn't step away, or tell me about the moments where you wanted to step away and perhaps there was some internal dialogue that was stopping you? Were there any moments like that? What does that sound like to you?
I have loved being in business all along the way. Not every one of those businesses was a success, but I have loved the challenge. So until just recently, I was never tempted to step back. I knew as I got older, I knew I was going to have to step back at some point. But I was actually 76 when I retired last year. So I it's funny. It came about I had been planning this for some time, but I didn't know exactly what the date would be. And one morning about a year ago, I got up and I said to my wife, if I didn't have to go in today, I wouldn't go. And she said, in 44 years of marriage, I've never heard you make that statement. And that was when I knew it was time. But fortunately, I had begun preparing for that quite a bit early. So I guess that would be the moment. But it took a long, long time because I really have jumped out of bed looking forward to work
Yeah.
virtually every day of my adult life.
Yeah. So, there was never a time when it's like, oh, there was dread. I have to get rid of this, but I can't, So you've always loved it. So then, now you've made that decision. Now you're like, if I couldn't, what do I do now? What was the next steps for you to start allowing yourself to step away?
So about 8 years ago, I recognized that this day was coming, and I knew I had become frustrated, as you said in the intro, with the idea of bringing people from outside the organization in to be leaders. And even though they were trained as leaders, they were not trained in small business. And
Mm.
small business, as you know, is a unique it's a unique operation.
Yeah.
And for those of us that love small business and are entrepreneurial, it's fun. For those people who are a little more buttoned up, it's chaotic and it's frustrating. And, instead of doing one, two, or three things really well, you're asked to do 10 things in a day. And some of them are not in your wheelhouse. So I decided that I was a lot better off if I could devise a program to train those loyal, motivated employees that I had surrounded myself with to become leaders because none of them really were very far along in leadership training. But I thought it was so much better to take people already steeped in a small business culture and make leaders out of them if they were willing. So that's what happened, and it didn't go as smoothly as I would have liked. The first program, I was trying to teach them to think like me, an entrepreneurial owner, and I suddenly realized I wasn't going to be able to do that. But it's okay because I didn't need more entrepreneurs; I needed leaders. So I took a step back and I retooled the program. And then about 3.5 years ago, I started by identifying what was holding people back from leadership roles and success in leadership roles. Once we identified those for each, there were 8 people in the program. Once we identified those, then we began breaking through those ceilings that were holding them back. And along the way, I knew that something was missing, and for whatever reason, I decided to write a blog every 2 weeks to the management team. And it was kind of random. It was about various management and leadership issues. And they were short. They were all concentrated on one leadership principle. And at the end of 2 years, I had 52 blogs written. And one weekend, I read through all of them and I said, gosh, I'm going to be leaving soon. I'm going to publish this as a book. So I reduced the number from 52 to 35. So there are 35 chapters, each illustrating a separate leadership principle. That is the book, Growing Your Own. And what it has become is a desktop reference. It's not a training program unto itself, but it is something that an employee who is new to leadership can refer to and go, wait a minute, chapter 14 was about procrastination, and I'm finding myself procrastinating. Let me reread that chapter. The chapters are about 2.5 pages long, so they're quick and they're simple and they're about principles that can be implemented today and you can see results tomorrow. So that's how I trained the group to do it. We were successful. 6 out of the 8 survived the program and became the leaders who now run the company.
Amazing. I love that it's a little desktop tool and it's the short little chapters and it's so easy to use because,
Well, you have to understand who you're teaching.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong with a 400-page academic approach to leadership,
yeah.
but my people aren't going to read it, and my people are not going to put it in place. So I happened to learn the way I wound up teaching others, and so it was very natural for me to do that. But you can't just expound on theories of leadership and expect blue collar people, particularly, or inexperienced leaders to grab hold of those. So, but I
100%.
do find that the simplicity of the concepts is very, very simple for people to put in place.
Yeah. And it's especially true in small business, right? Because you
Yes.
attract a different kind of workforce in small business. It's, you know, and they, as you say, wear many hats. You wear many hats when you work in a small business and you are doing lots of different things. And so you just don't have the time to, and the luxury to sit and learn very complex principles. And unfortunately, business owners will go out to leadership training experts to try train their leaders, but as you say, it's just too much and it's not practical and there for those people. So I love that you put that thinking behind it. I
Well,
will
it was a
definitely
little bit
do
out
that.
of necessity. I began
Yeah.
doing research, and I had read a lot on leadership over the years. But as I looked for help in books and online, there's very little written that's aimed at small businesses. And I was shocked, actually. That was the first time I was aware of that. And so the book happens to fill a gap out there, even though there's millions of leadership books on the market. This one is specifically designed for small business and for people in business who have not been exposed to a lot of leadership training.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, in that time, had you promoted people who weren't ready for leadership? Had you tried to
I
promote
sure had.
people? And what was what happened in that situation? Was that creating more frustration? Like what was happening there?
It was very empowering to them, but they soon learned that they simply had not been prepared for that level of leadership. So they either were not very good, and we tried to continue to nurse them along without much success, or we lost good employees. They were
Mm,
so frustrated by the experience that they wound up knowing they were in over their heads and decided to go back somewhere where they could do what they were really good at.
yeah.
But we also had the same problem with bringing in leaders from outside who became frustrated with the culture of a small business.
Yeah.
And then the third problem is that if you go outside, the people who have been so loyal to you and have worked all these extra hours and just loved the chaos of the small business, all of a sudden we're reporting to someone who had not been through the wars like they had and maybe had a different perspective on how things should be done. And so that was very difficult. So that's what led me to say, if I can make leaders out of these people, that's really the best choice.
Amazing. So inspiring. I mean, as you know, this is a podcast about internal dialogue and self-talk. Tell me, what have you had to confront within yourself while going through this process about you, within you?
I When you are a business owner, you always kind of believe that your way is the best way. Uh, in buying an HVAC company, I learned to delegate pretty quickly because I can't fix an air conditioner and I can't install an air conditioner. So I have been for a long time, I've been dependent on others, and I understand that concept. But there are some things that I know that I still do better. So it's hard for me to delegate always in the areas of strength. I'm particularly strong in vision and finance and marketing, and no one in the organization has those skills to the degree that I do. So as I have stepped away, I still have weekly meetings with the president of the company who took over, who was part of the training group. So I'm still involved a little bit, but I made a decision that I was not going to set foot in the company except for quarterly meetings where we went over financials. And so I don't drop by. And that's real hard for me because I'm
Yeah.
a very relational person and I miss the employees. And I know in some cases they miss me being around. Um, so that was one of the internal talks I had, was that regardless of whether people are saying, hey, you need to come back, we'd love to see you. And my own gut is saying, boy, I'd love to see these people and find out what's going on. I promised myself that it wasn't going to happen. And so far, it's been 3 months and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not tempted to do that. That was one of them. Just the idea that I'm still the primary owner of both companies, and I am entrusting, as much as I trust these people, knowing that I'm entrusting them with that much responsibility and it directly affects my estate, that's a gut wrenching call. If I hadn't trained them personally, I don't know that I could have made that. I think I would have made the decision to sell the company, and I still one day will probably have to sell the company in some form. But I wanted to make sure to protect the existing team. If they're willing to work this hard at running the business, then whoever buys the business will have a team that they'll want to preserve, not replace. So that was
Yeah.
part of my thinking as well.
Yeah. And I can't, it must be especially hard when, as you say, you spent your entire, all of those years loving going to work, loving the business. And when you're an entrepreneurial soul, business is fun. It doesn't feel like work on many days. It feels like a really fun, challenging hobby for me
Oh,
anyway, on many days.
100%,
And
100%.
so looking to my future, I can't imagine what that must be like going, okay, that's it. I have to draw the line here. I can't go in now. And I love the people and I love the business, but it's now time to hand that over. And it would be really, really difficult. Yeah.
If I did not have the things I'm doing to market the book and the training course, the podcasting and all, I'm really busy doing all
Yeah.
of this. And so I don't have those times where I sit back and say, well, I wonder if I ought to break that rule and go in and see the business. I've got plenty on my plate, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that I do, because I don't have to have any of those kinds of second thoughts.
Yeah. I love now though, I'm retiring out of business and you're starting this whole new training program, promoting a book. You don't really ever leave, do you?
Well, entrepreneurs are always entrepreneurs. That's one of the things
Always.
that drives us. But I mean, if it's this much fun to do this stuff, why wouldn't I want to do it?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I feel a little bit of a kindred spirit with you, although I've still got another 45 years ahead of me, I would say.
Well, good for you.
um, a lot of founders too, struggle with trusting their teams. Before I started my own businesses, I worked I worked in corporate, I worked in community development, and I've worked for other entrepreneurial leaders. And the thing that stood out to me when I worked for an entrepreneur, which is funny because now I am one for the last 10 years, was that, they struggle to trust and they struggle to really allow their teams to trust their teams. How much of that is, and when I actually asked my leader at the time, what's that about? Because you've got to trust us, we can do this. And she would say, oh, it was about me having standards for my business. I've got standards for my business. But how much of that is really control disguised as standards? And what advice do you have to entrepreneurs around how you can start letting go of some of that control?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's fundamental to the whole process that I've been through. I'm a believer that while I'm good at a variety of things, I'm not good at 15 things. And so the business was always going to be better when I found people who were stronger in areas than I was and offloaded responsibility. So you don't offload responsibility all at once. And we've always had a very clear set of values for the company. The reason that we're in business is to provide exceptional customer service by empowering and supporting employees. So everything we do runs through the filter of, does it improve our customer service? Does it empower and support our employees? And if it doesn't, then we don't do it. So similarly, if I'm going to turn over control of anything, does it enhance that mission? And when it does, I mean, I didn't have any problem turning over the field work. I had to. Well, we're stronger because I made that decision.
Mhm.
I'm not an accountant. So the financial side of the business, although I oversee it, the financial side of the business needed to be turned over. Once you look through and say, that person is stronger, or at least I think that person would be stronger in this role, then you delegate responsibility a little bit at a time. It's not an all or nothing proposition. We've always developed leaders by giving them a little bit of responsibility, working with them to make sure that they were on the right program, that they could follow through and handle that project and then could be given another project. So it isn't a matter of relinquishing control one afternoon. It's a matter of relinquishing control a little bit at a time. But anybody who thinks their business will not be stronger by having several people handle meaningful tasks for them just isn't, being honest with themselves. None of us can be good at that many things. And so as your business grows, you don't have any choice but to face that issue.
You do. And, I think too, many entrepreneurs might have had, like you, multiple businesses, not all of them successful, but then you nail one and it has to be scaled, it has to grow. And now you're not going to be the sole person who's growing this business anymore. You have to be able to rely on others. And I think that's a real tricky mindset for a lot of entrepreneurs and people who have small business because
I do too, but I also think if you flip the script on that and say, how much more powerful is it if I am empowering people? If I'm building people, if I could have a team, instead of just me or me and one other, if I could have a team of 6 people who can handle meaningful responsibility, that I would take so much pride in that. I do take so much pride because it worked. And the knowledge that I have helped build them into something most of them never dreamed they could be. Only one of those people ever thought he would be running a company. All the rest of them saw themselves as being good in an area, but with a definite ceiling. So just as doing business every day is really fun for an entrepreneur, building people is also another really fun exercise if you look at it that way.
yeah, 100%. And it's so rewarding for everybody involved, really. You play a big part in their lives too. Tell me, to those who may be working for entrepreneurs, tell me, what advice have you got for them who, if they are with an entrepreneur and they want to maybe, or maybe they've never seen themselves in a leadership role, or maybe they would like to and they don't know how to tackle it with an entrepreneurial leader who may be struggling to step back, what advice would you give them?
Long before the entrepreneur wants to step back is the time to start having conversations. I always have welcomed anybody to walk in and say, hey, I just want to pick your brain for a minute when you have time. Maybe we do it after work. Maybe you're busy now, but would you mind just talking to me? Well, I love those kinds of conversations. I've always loved those kinds of conversations. And if you are modeling the kind of leadership that you want your people to have, then it's very easy to talk about it. And it's very easy for them to see, oh, that's why he did what he did. And out of those conversations begins that small delegation. I mean, I've had those casual conversations with somebody and said, I'll tell you what, here's what I'd like you to work on. Just work on it outside the company. This doesn't really have anything to do with your direct job, but it's just a test. It's to see if they really mean business. Some of them don't ever come back. And so we had a good conversation, but they're not really interested in moving anywhere to the next level. But others come back, and some of them come back again and again and again. I began meeting once every other week with one of our employees who's a long-term employee, never ever saw himself in leadership. He had problems with time management, and I've got a pretty good handle on time management. So I would spend 30 minutes with him every other week, and we'd talk about time management. And it led to him having so much comfort with me. No longer was I the owner, but I was kind of a mentor to him. And he became part of our leadership team. And now, I mean, he has soared beyond any expectation he ever had. He never thought he would be a leader. In fact, when he came to us, his plan was to work for 6 months, earn enough money to go back to Mexico, and that was it. It was clearly just a job. It was not a career, and he's with us 19 years later.
What an amazing story. See that, and that's the difference, listening and taking the time and, having that mentoring kind of relationship does, right? I just love that.
Yeah,
Um,
I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends. I
mhm.
don't think there's a one that wouldn't have welcomed that kind of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. There's a sense of relief in it too, right? Because when you feel like somebody's on the right page and wants to come along on the journey, you think, yes, this is the opportunity. Because speaking for myself, the thought of bringing loads of new outside people into my business is very scary for me. It's scary. Like the
Should be.
internal fear is like, what happens? This might run away. And it's not control as such, although that's a part of it. But it's also fear of it getting legs and it runs away from me, right? So it is a relief when you have somebody who's already part of your team and can grow in there with you, and comes along with that conversation. It's so good.
The
Yeah.
one of the beautiful things about in his particular case is that he's Hispanic, and Hispanic families are very large. You know, they get together, their extended family. And even though he's in his mid 40s, he is the patriarch of that family now, just because he's grown so much as a leader. He'll tell you he's a better parent, he's a better husband, and he's certainly a better family leader. So these you mentioned in terms of getting legs. Leadership gets legs.
Yeah.
Leadership has, whether you're going to become a significant leader in a company is almost immaterial. Leadership is better in every phase of your life when you learn some of those principles.
Yeah. Yeah. And also leadership eventually, it leadership is not about you. It's about them. When
It's
you
about
are a
influence.
leader, it's not about you anymore. When you're growing, when you're climbing that ladder, it's about you and your career. But that was my realization. I became a CEO of a consulting practice, and it was my second CEO role, but it was the first time ever that I really understood what steady leadership was and what it was to be in service to your team rather than being the person in charge only. So I think that's definitely a something that you have to grow into as a leader yourself. Yeah.
Now, was it modeled for you, or did you just come across that?
What what
The,
was
the, the servant
Oh,
leadership
the
idea
servant
that you,
leadership. It's funny because it was actually the situation that I got put in, Rich. It was modeled to me, but I had a wonderful mentor at the time. And I also, at the time, found quite serendipitously, because that's what happens. Like something comes across your plate at the right time. I got some excellent reading, and I was reading some wonderful stuff about leadership. And I was applying that at the time. But the situation that I was put in, because I inherited that CEO role, it was a failing organization, and I was tasked with either saving it or winding it up. And we were on the brink. My team and I were on the brink of saving it, but my board got spooked because in order to save that organization, we had to change the mission a little bit of that organization. They got spooked; they didn't want to do that, and they decided to wind it up. And that experience of winding it up with that team over months, winding up all of our contracts professionally, we didn't drop anyone. The team stayed there. They supported me and I supported them. We were all there to the end. In fact, those whose roles had already been made redundant, um, they came back and volunteered to help wind up. It
wow.
was the most incredible leadership experience. And, people say, oh, winding up an organization, that must be awful. Yes, the actual experience was awful. But in terms of the whole, the relationships that I have, what I learned about myself, what I learned about leadership was the best thing that I ever went through. And I wouldn't be 10 years later in my own business doing so well with my own work if it weren't for that experience, right?
You
So,
must have been very good through that difficult time.
yeah, it's hard. I mean, and as you say, you've had 8 businesses, not all of them are successful. I think when you can see that failure or something not being successful is not a failure, it's just a learning opportunity. When you can do that, your whole world opens to you. And I don't know what you think about that in your journey. 8 businesses, not all of them successful, a couple of them really successful. What's your thoughts on that internal dialogue that people might have when things don't go the right way?
I've heard that comment that it's just, it's not a failure, it's a learning experience. I consider them to be failures. So I
Really?
I can't get past that. I was raised that way, and that's actually a
Yeah.
little. before I had my first failure, I wasn't positive that I could ever recover from a failure
Yeah.
because of the way I was raised, and that there was just so much shame around failing. And in fact,
Yeah.
I've got a chapter in the book about that. But that's no way to be. I mean, I wish I were not that way, and I'm less that way now. But it was very, very difficult for me to acknowledge that, because I my career started off very rapidly, and it was in my early 40s that I hit that speed bump, and that was hard because I had been the guy who was moving forward faster than anybody else, and all of a sudden I saw friends of mine who were passing me up, and I felt stupid. I felt like I had squandered a heck of a head start, and fortunately, I have a number of mentors. I have a great wife, and they helped me get through it. But
Mm.
that was not a fun period of my life.
Yeah. Look, by all means, I'm not saying that, if something fails, I'm certainly not going, oh well, that's fine. There is all of that other shame, and all of those thoughts do come to mind. In fact, I just recently wound up, I had two businesses. I'm in the process of winding up the second one at the moment. Wasn't a success. One business is 10 years old, scaling. The other one I started 3 years ago with my sister, not doing so great. We've decided to wind it up because it's not the direction that we wanted to go with it. And I tell you, it stings because, as you know, you put in all of the work and the time, and then you question yourself. Um, but I also think that's the entrepreneurial spirit. You win some and you lose some, and you can either allow yourself to quit, or you can go, right, what have I learned, and I can move on here.
I One of the benefits of being retired and old is that I know I have a lot of people in the same situation, and I decided 3 months ago that we were going to have a meeting every month of some of that group, and so 8 at a time. And I have them over here to my house, and we sit around and talk about things. We deal with a specific question, but the first time through, everybody went through their story, and I learned these are people I've known in many cases for 40 years. I learned something new about each one of them, but every one of them had had multiple failures, and all of them are very successful, at the end of their careers. But it's just part of the entrepreneurial experience.
It is. I think I was watching a video the other day of the founder of Netflix, incredibly successful business. He's also founded 8 businesses, and he was doing a presentation saying, these are my 8 businesses that I founded. And if you'd asked me at the start of each one which one would be successful, I couldn't tell you. Because it's true. You start a business and you think it's going to be successful. You put in all the work for it to be successful. You never start a business with the hope that it fails.
Sure.
But you don't always know which one it's going to be, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Where can people find you? Where can they find your book? How can they connect with you?
The website is growingyourown.net. I love communicating directly with people. If they want to email me, my email address is rich@growingyourown.net. The book, the training course, speaking engagements are all talked about on the website. And so anything they want to find out about me, they can find out there. I'm not very active on social media, but I do post regularly on LinkedIn. So I'd love to be followed on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, I'll definitely be heading along there to follow you there, and keeping in touch and getting your book, because I know that's going to be really relevant to me. Thank you so much, Rich. I really appreciate your time today. And I do wish you every success with your, newly found semi-retirement in your new journey ahead of you. And thank you to all of our listeners today. What I've learned today is that letting go of business isn't really a capability problem, but it's about the conversations that you have not only with yourself, but with your team, and how you can, when you do that, face those conversations, you are able to let go when you absolutely need to. I will see you next time on the Second Voice podcast. Until then, take care.